think most people feel better when they have consistency. So I wouldn't maybe call it continuity, I'd call it consistency. But John has had a really good speech last week where, and so many people who didn't want the so-called continuity within the party were actually really impressed with what he had to say. He wants us to wipe the slate clean and move forward together. And I think we'll do that under John. If anybody can bring it all together and move on and learn from the last few years, I think it's John Swinney.
We're accustomed to thinking of politicians as being ambitious types, always dreaming of climbing another inch up the greasy pole and eventually getting to the top job. But the SNP can't be like that at all because only one of them seems to want to be leader. He's John Swinney, and he's been leader before, back in the early 2000s. And the rest of the party has until midday today to say they will stand. But it seems almost certain now that only Swinney's name will be in the hat. Anne McLaughlin is an SNP MP and she joins us now. Good morning.
Morning.
Is John Swinney the right man to lead Scotland?
Yeah. I mean, you know, if you told me a year ago that John Swinney would be leading the party, I wouldn't have predicted that. But when he said that he was considering putting his name forward, it just seemed to fall into place. And I think collectively we all just said, wow, that is a great idea. So yeah, a bit of a surprise, but a good one. And I think he is absolutely, he's well respected, not just across my party, but across Scotland. I think, yeah, let's just watch this space and see what he does with it.
But is a coronation, Anne, really what SNP members want? I mean, many have serious concerns about some of the party's recent policies and the direction of travel, especially over the issue of independence. Shouldn't they at the very least be given a say in who their next leader is?
Well, they are given a say. So our constitution says that anybody can put themselves forward if they get a certain number of signatures. And we did have somebody who did that, a long-standing member of the SNP who has opted not to put those papers forward. And I have to say, we have until 12 noon. For all we know, somebody else could be putting the name forward. And
you're not tempted to enter yourself, Anne?
Absolutely never in a million years would I be tempted by that. But somebody else could. And, you know, you see, Graham McCormick is a long-standing member of the party, but he's largely unknown, and he could have been in that contest today. That's how democratic we are.
But hang on, there's a serious point here. You know, is it really right that when voters in Scotland went to the polls in the Holyrood elections back in 2021, they thought they were voting for Nicola Sturgeon to be the SNP leader and the First Minister? Since then, you've had not once, but now this will be your second change in leader. You're almost like the Tories in terms of how quickly you're turning over leaders. And this is what Nicola Sturgeon herself said when Rishi Sunak became PM. Just have a listen.
He should call an early general election. He's the second person in a row to be appointed as Prime Minister by Tories, not elected by the population. The idea that he can go 2 years before seeking or winning a democratic mandate, I think, is just unthinkable.
Does what Nicola Sturgeon said there still apply?
But we've got a different system. Our voters don't elect the First Minister. The Parliament votes the First Minister. So we can say that John Swinney is going to be our party leader. The Parliament decides, and that's how it works in Scotland. And he will go in front of the Parliament, and the Parliament will decide yes or no to John Swinney being the First Minister. But I have to say, I actually think you vote for the party. I've always thought this, regardless of which party. You vote for the party, and you're not particularly voting for one person within that party, and that party has the right to change their leader. But as I say, in Scotland, it's a very different system anyway.
Some say that Humza Yousaf struggled a bit as First Minister because he was seen as just being continuity Nicola Sturgeon. Isn't John Swinney just continuity Humza Yousaf?
I think one day we're going to look back and see that what Humza Yousaf suffered from was not that. It was from an incredibly difficult set of circumstances, most of which were out with his control. And I think he did a really good job. And I'm not convinced that Humza Yousaf won't be back one day in that role, because I think he was exceptionally good. He just didn't stand a chance with all the online abuse, the different circumstances that I referred to, and the media onslaught. In terms of continuity, I like continuity, I like consistency. And I think most people feel better when they have consistency. So I wouldn't maybe call it continuity, I'd call it consistency. But John has had a really good speech last week where, and so many people who didn't want the so-called continuity within the party were actually really impressed with what he had to say. He wants us to wipe the slate clean and move forward together. And I think we'll do that under John. If anybody can bring it all together and move on and learn from the last few years, I think it's John Swinney.
I mean, he has been leader before in the early noughties, and that wasn't the most successful period for the SNP. I mean, you talk about continuity. It sounds like the voters in Scotland don't want continuity. A poll over the weekend for the Sunday Times Scotland, the first in terms of Yousaf's resignation, shows support for the SNP at Westminster has fallen to 29%, meaning you could be on course to go from 43 MPs at present to 15. Are you expecting to lose seats at the general election?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I want to just go back to what you said about John Swinney. I worked with him when he was party leader before, and you said that the party wasn't as successful then, but John was part of that development. When I first stood for this party, nobody was getting elected. None of us would have been elected. We had to build our way up in much the same way as the Greens are having to do now. And he led us through that, through to the success that we've had in recent years. So he was very much part of that. I don't know what's going to happen because, as you know yourself, it's very unpredictable. The polls go up and down. All I can say is that we are just very much focused on the things that we are good at, and that is tackling the cost of living, holding the Tory government to account. We'll very happily hold a Labour government to account. And yeah, we'll just see what happens. We don't even know when the election is, so we're just working away. We'll see.
Appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Anne McLaughlin there, SNP MP.
So friends, with that, please show your appreciation for John Swinney.
This place reflects my values, who I am, and it's therefore the right place for me to confirm that I intend to stand for election as leader of the Scottish National Party. I want to build on the work of the SNP government to create a modern, diverse, dynamic Scotland that will ensure opportunity for all of her citizens. I want to unite the SNP and unite Scotland for independence. Thank you so much.